Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today for our session, An Untapped Path Towards Cloud Security, hosted by the Cloud Security Alliance. My name is Yaniv Bardayan, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vulcan Cyber, a cyber risk management company focusing on managing and orchestrating the business processes that are associated with risk reduction across multiple cyber hygiene programs like vulnerability management, application security, and cloud security. Practically, will help our customers reduce risk at scale, mitigate and remediate vulnerabilities, eventually control this entire life cycle of the cyber risk assessments that you're doing. Now, in this particular session, we're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about the path towards migrating effectively to the cloud without compromising on security. Because in most cases, when we want to migrate to the cloud, we want to do it fast because it has a lot of business benefits. Sometimes we are part of a bigger program, either modern infrastructure program, modern IT, digitalization, and so on, digital transformation and such. But also, just practically, the cloud holds a lot of benefits. It helps us deliver software better, manage our infrastructure better, and so on. What we as security people need to do is to make sure these infrastructures are secured. So when we stand in front of this decision, and this is usually more relevant for organizations that are migrating from on-prem to cloud or are managing hybrid environments, and not really organizations that were born in the cloud. So if you're 20 people, 1-year-old startup, you're probably built natively to the cloud with native infrastructures, native capabilities. Usually, when you are a large enterprise, what you do is you start migrating, start considering two different paths. But before I'm going to talk about the traditional security scanners path and the cloud security scanners path, I want to talk about the macro. In the macro, when we talk about North America specifically, we usually see one of 4 cloud providers, infrastructure as a service providers that are relevant. 1 and 2 are obviously AWS and Azure. They are the most common in the enterprise environment, tailing by GCP, who also have very fair market share, and also a couple of customers we have seen already are also using the Oracle Cloud option. And generally, more and more cloud providers are coming in. These are, I would say, the 4 dominant ones. So when you're starting to think about migrating, you're actually migrating workloads, you're starting to ask yourself, how can I gain visibilities in these workloads? How can I make sure that I have an effective ability to assess risk in a way that will allow me then to respond and obviously reduce the possibility of terrible things that are happening? And the path is one of 2. 1, let's use my traditional security scanners that I use today in order to scan my traditional environment, my on-prem environment, and implement them in my cloud environment. The problem is with this path, it has also benefits, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But the challenges is that these platforms were architected for the on-prem environment. So they require things that are not as easy to do or as natively done in the cloud, like deploying agents. The benefits is if you implement something like a Qualys or Tenable on your cloud environment, you implement the same scanner. So you have the same tool, one tool to manage. It gives you full visibility. It's more of a pane of glass type of thing. It gives you full visibility on your entire hybrid environment. By the way, another slight challenge is that some of these scanners don't really have native cloud scanning capabilities. If you want to scan containers, it doesn't necessarily cover all of the use cases. But I think that today in the market, generally, the offerings of these traditional or say incumbents, big scanning companies is fairly comprehensive. The other path is to go to the smaller companies, but still the modern, well, apart from Prisma Cloud that are being delivered by Palo, the modern cloud security scanners are operating natively. They're usually more easily deployed on the cloud, especially things like Orca that are agentless, etc. But the challenge is that eventually it creates a silo. You have to work with another vendor, another scanner, and you have to view eventually 2 different screens to understand your on-prem risk and your cloud risk. The problem is that when it comes to cloud migration, we are usually pushed to take decisions quickly because from up top, we have an agenda. We want to migrate to the cloud for the cloud benefits, the long as they are. But the biggest barrier still to this migration is security. And I'm not going to read the statistics here. I think it's clear, you know it from your day-to-day. When you are being forced to move, you have to act fast to assure that the environment is eventually secured. With that, the challenge is that these decisions come usually also with a high cost, as well as not only in budgetary numbers, but actually in deployment numbers. This is not only painful to you. These are the good news. This is also painful for the traditional cloud providers, because what the infrastructure as a service company wants is you in the cloud and your workloads in the cloud. This is how they make money. This is how they grow their business. So they chose, this is actually a very interesting thing, to actually start providing embedded security offerings. So with AWS, it could be GuardDuty, Inspector, and others. With Azure, it could be Azure Security Center, Google as well with their Security Center. Oracle just came out with their embedded vulnerability assessment scanner, by the way, for free. And what they're doing is they're providing fair tools. They're not as robust, as comprehensive, coherent as dedicated security tools are being developed and provided by security companies, but they are definitely good enough to start. And the nice thing is that their marginal cost is fairly low. So when we look at it with Oracle, by the way, it's free. And the reason they do that, again, is that they're not trying to take, market share away from Qualys or market share away from Prisma. What they want to do is to give you an easy path to migrate. It might be a temporary solution. It might be your constant solution. But from your perspective, your ability to use these native tools that are fairly cheap, they do not require a lot of implementation effort, and they're native within your cloud provider, it gives you more say embedded, not native in your cloud provider, gives you the ability to migrate really quickly without testing a lot of tools and their compatibility to all of these particular cloud environments, not getting into a project of implementing traditional tools that are not necessarily built for the cloud on your cloud, and eventually paying very low numbers on these offerings. This eventually comes in to reduce the barrier for you to enter. So if you want to build a vulnerability assessment management plan or program that is both for the cloud and for on-prem, you can just choose Amazon Inspector or Azure Sentinel to start scanning your cloud infrastructure and immediately start seeing results. Now, I would say it won't be perfect, but it is good enough. And if you're under pressure, if your CIO is pushing, if your management says, hey, we have to migrate because it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better for our development teams, this is a very valid path forward. And let me tell you another thing. This is not only something that the infrastructure as a service companies are doing, the cloud providers, this is also something that platform as a service companies are doing. So companies, for example, like GitHub or GitLab are doing just the same. And it always comes from the same mindset. There are barriers for traditional, I won't say traditional, but for companies that have embedded or have invested a lot of time and effort and budgets in their on-prem environment that are natively and conceptually more secured, just because they have they're there and there are a lot of tools that are protecting them. And migrating not only your cloud infrastructure or your infrastructure into the cloud, but also your code base for that matter, from an on-prem code repository to a cloud code repository, also requires you to adapt your code scanners and application security scanners to the cloud world. Here as well, both GitHub, Microsoft, as well as GitLab came in and said, hey, just like what Amazon had done with Inspector, we're going to do natively within our platform as a service offerings, particularly with our Git repositories, and we're going to give you native tools to scan your code in a way that allows you to migrate easily. Again, without saying goodbye to all of your on-prem Git repositories, but on the other hand, still get some level of security beyond what you're having in order to encourage the move and to start migrating either to new stuff you're building or also slowly migrate your existing workloads, existing code bases into it. So this is just an example, I know we're talking about cloud, but the reason I'm stating and I'm talking about GitLab and GitHub is that this is not something that is going to stop. This is a trend. All of these cloud, or I would say IaaS and PaaS and SaaS providers have an incentive to give you security assurance and tools to migrate in an easy way, because they are making money not from the security side, but just from the hosting part. Their business is a hosting business. They're hosting your code or they're hosting your infrastructure. So with that, what they want to do is they want to eventually make sure you are migrating easily without compromising a lot on your security. And this is eventually something that is very, very, very beneficial for us security practitioners. I can decide that I'm migrating. I can move to the more, I would say, cost-effective, budgetary efficient options right off the bat in the beginning that are embedded within these infrastructure as a service providers, whomever they would be. Some of them, again, comes for free. Oracle has just published a free vulnerability assessment scanner for OCI workloads. So you can keep scanning vulnerabilities in the cloud without even paying a lot of money on it. You can spare time and invest it otherwise than getting into a huge agent deployment project in the cloud that you're not even sure you're going to maintain. You're not even sure you want to use your traditional cloud, your traditional scanning providers on the cloud. And lastly, which is never bad, you can save money. So if it's end of the year, if you have this, you have a hiccup in how you plan your budget, this is at least gives you the ease of keep the organization moving. We are as security people should be enablers to the business without feeling like we are neglecting our responsibility. But, and there is some sort of but here, what you also need to understand is that it doesn't come without a price. So these native tools have a lot of benefits. They also have some challenges. One, they create silos, for better and for worse. You're scanning with one scanner, you're going to get everything in one place. When you're starting to duplicate your scanners, even if one scanner is doing a better job than the other, you're going to have multiple tools you have to work with. There are other solutions like cyber risk management platforms that are solving that, but we're talking about the migration to the cloud here, so this is one. Secondly, the information is not necessarily complete. Usually, the native tools or the embedded tools are lagging behind. When you're trying to compete with a business, a very valid and solid business like Qualys, it exists for almost 22 years. The ability to build a repository of vulnerabilities, the ability to scan the same level is difficult. It takes time. So I would say probably 80% is solved, but there is still the extra 20, which is always the hardest 20-80 approach that these native scanners still need to complete. Some of them, not all of them, might be immature. I think this is more subjective because if you have nothing, something is better. But if you compare it to, again, very mature 20-year-old platforms, then obviously there are some gaps. And third, in some cases, the UI UX experience is not as advanced as you'd like it, because the majority of work that has been done is usually on the back end. The UI might be a more cloud-facing or IT-facing UI versus UI that modern and Chinese security tools might offer you. But still, it gets the job done. If you want a list of workloads and a list of vulnerabilities, you're going to get it from the native scanning. If you want, dazzling dashboards, this is not where you're going to look for it. But honestly, I'm not sure this is what you need or this is what you are willing to withhold or hold your security programs or your, not really security, but your cloud migration and security programs for. What it also allows you to do to focus on this, especially the budgetary aspect of things, the fact that these particular tools are more cost effective, is that you can start looking at other things that are happening apart from scanning. What we have seen from what we have encountered and we have seen with not only cloud security programs, but other vulnerability management application security programs, is that the post-scanning phase is where most organizations fall short. So you might have the best scanner in the world for the cloud that is, that purposely built from, companies that are either huge or have raised a lot of money, but eventually you get this visibility, very similar visibility as you're getting from the embedded platforms of the infrastructure as a service providers, but you're still kind of stuck. You're still stuck with everything that happens post risk detection. You're still manually prioritizing vulnerabilities. You're manually identifying remediations and mitigations to vulnerabilities. You're using separate tools for particular parts like prioritization and others. You pass raw scan data to the people that actually needs to address or fix it. And eventually these things are holding you back from your goal. Your goal is not to scan everything. Your goal is to reduce risk. And reducing risk happens after you gain this visibility. We usually like to look at the model and say, after scanning, there are 6 other steps, 7 steps process, it's actually a cycle when it comes to how you need to look at it. And after scanning, you need to manage all of these different sources of scanning. Again, if you're going to go embedded or you're going to go native cloud, next to your traditional security scanners in your on-prem environment, you need to get one single view of what is going on and what you need to solve. Secondly, you need to triage and prioritize vulnerabilities. You need to collaborate with teams outside of security. And again, when you migrate to the cloud, we're talking about multiple teams, both the cloud teams, the dev teams, the traditional IT teams, etc. You need to help remediate these vulnerabilities either directly through patches and so on and upgrades and such, or changes of configuration and so on, or different workarounds, your firewalls, your endpoint, your cloud security posture tools and such. And unfortunately, for better and for worse, we don't have 1 or 2 problems. We have thousands, I might be even optimistic, like hundreds of thousands of problems across our infrastructures and our code. And we need to delegate them, track them, make sure they're meeting SLAs, show them to auditors, and report on them to whomever wants to see them. If it's the operational people that wants to see the reports on how we progress, or our managers or auditors, etc. All of this is waiting for you to take the decision on how do you scan and how you provide visibility to the cloud. The fact that you have the ability to quickly choose what you want to do and quickly commit to a certain embedded cloud technology gives you the benefit, and also, but again, in a cost-effective way, gives you the benefit of starting to explore how you can invest more in everything that happens after. Gartner calls it the risk-based cybersecurity approach. They started from only talking about vulnerability management, but honestly, when we look at risk-based, we usually talk about every cyber hygiene aspect. It would be vulnerability management, but obviously it could be also cloud security, application security, identity and access, third-party risk. All these things should be done in a risk-based manner. It takes under consideration a lot of other stuff apart from scanning. So when you think about these cloud providers and you think about the way they behave, you need to remember their goal is to not take market share from Qualys or Tenable or Orca or Palo. Their goal is to migrate you to the cloud. They're doing it by basically reducing the biggest barrier they see. And the biggest barrier they see is security. The biggest option that was out there was trying to embed traditional tools into what we call the modern infrastructures. This is not as easy. And this is why cloud providers said, hey, we have development power, we have understanding, let's reduce it, either by the way through M&As or others, but eventually it's provide an embedded tool that can help quickly and effectively provide these answers to security teams. I'm not even sure they would mind for you to start with it versus move back. But as we move ahead and move forward, we don't really know how the market will behave. What we are sure of is that the embedded security capabilities that are coming in with cloud providers are security capabilities that will allow you to migrate quicker and more effectively to the cloud without all of the burdens of choosing a new technology or migrating a traditional vendor to a cloud environment, which is always kind of challenging. So that's it. We've written also a very long article about how the cloud security posture and embedded security offerings of the cloud providers are behaving. So this is another thing you can do. And generally, I just want to say thank you very much for investing the time to hear me out, to talk a bit about how we perceive the modern path of cloud security programs. And obviously, I wish you all to find the right fit that helps you migrate to a more modern infrastructure easily and securely. This is why we are here. So thank you very much, everyone, and stay safe. And hopefully we can meet again soon in another session like this that we are hosting with our dear partners, the Cloud Security Alliance.